Hello and welcome back to Redirected. My name is Andrew East, and if this is your first time joining us, let me first just say welcome. And this is an interview series where we sit down with celebrities, athletes, entrepreneurs, really anybody who's experienced a significant pivot or change in life. I call these changes redirections. I've experienced several of them myself, from being a civil engineer to playing in the NFL to now doing online YouTube videos full time. And so I think we all go through these changes, and I wanted to learn from people who have gone through these changes to see how they did it, hear the stories of how they went through it and made it to the other side, in hopes that you and I could both learn from them and be better off for it. So today is a little bit of a different episode. I sit down with Larry Grobel, and I reached out to Larry probably a year and a half ago, hoping to interview him. I came across his work because he wrote a book called The Art of the Interview, and I was inspired to want to sit down with him and learn from him how to interview people after I had talked with probably 5 to 10 of my first guests on the show, and realized that, hey, interviewing is not as easy as I thought it would be. I thought it was just going to be a conversation and I would be great at it, and that proved not to be true. So I wanted to learn from the best, and I found Larry's work, and I was like, you know what, how cool would it be to learn interviewing from the author of The Art of the Interview himself. And so Larry was gracious enough to take the time and sit down with me in Los Angeles, and I really enjoyed my conversation with him. He proved to be a very warm, welcoming guy, and I could see how he was able to glean so much from these amazing Hollywood classic stars that he's talked to, like Al Pacino and Barbra Streisand and Marlon Brando, and he's interviewed everybody, has represented Esquire and Playboy and all the big magazines, doing large profiles on celebrities like this. And so I personally learned a lot about interviewing from Larry. I learned what I'm good at, what I need to work on, and it was a really, really fun couple hours that we got to spend together. So Larry, thank you for your time. If you guys haven't yet, I would love if you would rate the show and subscribe to it on whatever platform you're listening to. It's been so fun to also see your comments and your reviews that you've left me on social media, on Instagram stories and Twitter, and I love seeing those. I will always repost those when I see them, so feel free to reach out to me. If you want to learn more about Larry and his work, there's links down below. But without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump into this one with Larry Grobel.
I kind of follow the set structure of like, hey, I'm going to ask you these questions for sure.
Right.
And every interview starts here and ends here. I realized that, again, you were interviewing people when not everybody had access to podcast material or their own blog.
Before they were podcasts.
and so there was like very limited outlets, that a very select number of people who could do what you did. And that's why you interviewed so many of the Hollywood classics, legends, right?
Yeah.
But I realized that your goal in interviews was really to draw out the true essence of somebody, whether that was a racist person or a sexist person or someone who doesn't like his son, or you mentioned Halle Berry and her relationship with their first father and her first husband,
too.
right?
Yeah, right. And the ball player, the husband.
Right. And I realized that, like, really it's so much more comfortable when you're talking to somebody to try to just like bring out the only positive side of them, and like to talk about what everybody already knows. And that's something I've struggled with, because you do research and it's like, okay, well, this is easy to talk about. I know they're comfortable talking about this, so maybe I just try to do a different tilt on that. But
No, I don't go for that at all. I don't go for anything that I already know about a person. If I know a person is kind, gentle, great, terrific. I don't need to say, hey, you're kind, gentle, great, aren't you? I will show it in some parts of the interview and with the way they behave. But to me, if you want to appreciate who Halle Berry is, you really have to understand a lot of the background about it, the fights that she had, and her older sister, and then the father, who they had a little Maltese dog, and one time the dog is yapping. The father got so angry, he picked up the dog and threw it across smashing the wall, blood. And she never forgot that. How could you ever forget that, right? So there are things like that. James Garner, Maverick, in Rockford Files, whatever. he told me that when he was a kid, when he was 10 years old, his father remarried this bitch woman, and she made him dress up in a dress, and she called him Louise and says, "Go, Louise, go get me some bread down at the grocery store." And he would walk in the dress and back because, he did something wrong or whatever. And one time it got too far, and he attacked her. And I don't know if he was 14, 15 at the time. I'm not sure. But he attacked her, and he grabbed her by the neck, knocked her down on the bed, and he was choking her. And his siblings came, and they took him off her. Or he said, "I would have killed her. I think I would have killed her." Now, that's an incredible story to me. So here's this guy that you've admired, as an actor and the way he behaves and all, and this is his background. This is where that stuff came from.
Right.
So where does it all come from? Where does creativity come from? Where does inspiration come from? Why are we here? We got a certain amount of time, and we want to do the best we can with it. I thought I was going to die when I was 30. I had a dream, and the dream was very powerful, and I had it about 3 times. So one time we're driving down. I'm 16 years old. I've got my junior license, and I'm with my mother visiting her sister, and we're going now, and we're on Northern State Parkway, and I'm telling my mom, I'm having this crazy dream where, where I crash into an overhead, on Northern State Parkway, and I die, and so she says, "Oh, bite your tongue, don't talk like that." I said, "Yeah, it's happened 3 times." As I'm telling her this, I'm telling it to her, we pass a car that has smashed into the overpass, and what was missing in my dream, I was now visualizing the ambulance behind it with the red thing going, and it was shocking. And my mother said, "Don't ever talk about it." I mean, she was just like, that was it, that we don't talk about it. But in my dream, I was 30, by the way. So that was the whole point. I said, well, I think I got till I'm 30. So I joined the Peace Corps. I wasn't going in the Army, I was going to avoid that. But I spent an extra year there. So I spent 3 years. I spent 1 year after that traveling around the world. I met a Japanese girl, and then I'm married to her now. But it's like I knew if you go back and you start working right away, you get caught in that. And so I put off 3 years in the Peace Corps. I never looked at that as work, but it was pretty an amazing experience. Right. I took another year off just traveling because I had saved enough money with the Peace Corps put away to do that. So I was able to see the world as much as I could. I knew I needed experience to be a writer. I needed to see things. I needed to go, good travel, to move things, and I did. And so when I came back, I had the confidence to do stuff. I said, okay, now what? Well, let's write about these things now. And so I went to a newspaper and I convinced them that I could do these things. And that's how that started. And then they asked me, Newsday, when I moved to L.A., we figured out a way to get off Long Island, to get off writing about Long Island events. How? We want to do interviews with household names. So I said, who you got in mind? And they said, Mae West. I said, she's still alive? I had no idea. So I said, where do I find it? He says, how do we know? You're the one in Hollywood, because I had moved. So, okay, so then I looked up Mae West. I found out Paramount Pictures she worked for. I called Paramount. They put me in touch with a publicist. She was still alive. She lived on, Rossmore.
She was still
alive. And she had just made a movie, my record or something. So anyway, so I went and saw Mae West. And that was how it started. I interviewed her, she was quite a character. And she wouldn't let me tape record her. That was, that's what, too many people made money off her voice. So if they ever did an interview with her, they put it out as a record. She had that, why don't you come up and see me sometime voice, So,
sometime.
Yeah. So after this thing comes, the photographer took a picture of Mae West by the piano with a bust of her, a naked, all in white, behind her. And so I send in the interview to the editor at Newsday, and he calls me back a few days later after he says, Larry, he says, listen, whenever you do these interviews, he says, what's the name of the photographer? I said, Rick Meyer. Use him. That was a great photograph. Use him. And I went, Stan, I said, what about my interview? What do you think? Oh, it's fine. But just remember to use him. So I got it right away how important visuals are compared to the words. But, after that, I said, can I do any household name? And they said, who you have in mind? And I said, how about Linus Pauling? And I said, okay. How about J.P. Donlevy as a writer I liked, and how about Henry Moore, the artist? He's living in England. So they said yes to all these things. And so I was then out doing, I would go up to see Linus Pauling in Palo Alto. I would go to Forta de Marme in south of France, where Henry Moore had his summer home, and he was outside, and I'd go to do that. Or I would go, who else was I saying that I first started doing? I did Ray Bradbury, but that was just as his house. J.P. Donlevy. So he was he wrote The Ginger Man, a book I really loved. So I was getting to meet people that I admired, or if it was writers that I loved. I've done Capote, I've done Norman Mailer, I've done Saul Bellow, I've Joyce Carol Oates, Elmore Leonard. I've done a lot of writers like that because I like to talk to them. It's a wonderful profession in that way. It's a shame that it's doesn't exist anymore. It's like, now podcasts and whatever you only have an hour. I feel like I've screwed you completely because we'll probably talk for 3 hours though, and you can then take the hour you need.
No, and I want this to go longer because I feel like there's so much value to what you have saying. You have so many wonderful stories.
I have a lot of stories. And I also have a lot of ideas about interviews, and a lot of them aren't correct. I get people who argue with me about, how to edit an interview, some people just put a verbatim interview in there. And I said, that's impossible unless you talk to them for 5 minutes, which is what those are. If I talk to you Al Pacino, for instance, one of the things I did when I saw him many times for the Playboy interview, the first one, I did him enough to do a book on him. But he had never talked before. He was truly a virgin when it came to doing interviews. He was very nervous about it. And so, but he allowed me to just keep my tape recorder running. And we would forget about it. And we'd do all kinds of things in his apartment. We'd take walks. We'd play. I started working out with him when he was making Scarface. I did a lot of different things with him. But initially, he had a real resistance to being interviewed and to revealing himself about anything. So it really took a lot of getting to know you. And once he started warming up to it, he got into it. And when we finished, I said, okay, I've got enough. He says, what? He says, you're going to leave me now? It was one of those things. He says, it's like psychiatry. He says, no, I'm not ready. So, but we kept talking afterwards, but I said, wait until the article comes out and then see if you still want to talk to me. Because a lot of times people don't like what I put out. It depends on how you see yourself.
Why? Yeah. Well, why do you think that is? What is your goal? Is not to have them not like themselves in the article, right?
I don't care which way they think. My goal is to present who they are to a reading public. Why are you reading this? Well, because I'm curious about this character. If this character's got a facade and you're reading the facade, you haven't gotten anything out of it. You got no truth. But if you read, this is interesting about this person. I never knew Elizabeth Shue's brother died. From swinging on a branch, over a pool, and how did that affect her? Well, that's suddenly something, you may want to go read a little bit more. Do you want to just hear that Miles Davis likes jazz, or that he considers, he associates jazz with the word Nigger?
Right.
I can't even say it anymore, but he says it. He says that's what I see. Why? That's to me, I got what? Miles said that, I want to know more about that. That's what my goal is really it's kind of to educate. An artist creates a picture. When Picasso drew Gertrude Stein and she looked at it, she said, it doesn't look like me. And he said, yes, but it will. And he was right. That's the most famous picture of Gertrude Stein is the Picasso. I mean, is there something about portraying someone? And I see word portraits. I see the interview as an art as a word portrait. It's a portrait of a person, in depth as you can make it. Are you a good painter? Rembrandt's greatness was in the depth of the eyes that he was able to do. And it's just if you look closely at a Rembrandt, and you can get close to them in a museum, you'll see little gold dots, and yet it gives impression of depth.
Yeah.
And if you look at his own self-portraits, you look at the eyes, they get older over the years. Very interesting, man. I mean, not many artists can see all that. Henry Moore told me about that. He says, when I asked him, he was looking at a book of artists, and I said to him, who are some of the great artists? He says, you can tell a great artist, by his drawings. And there are only about, I said, how many great artists have there been? He says, only about 10. And he would, Michelangelo and Leonardo, and he included himself in it. I loved it. I always like to see those things.
Got to.
Anyway.
It's so interesting because there's a lot of levels of trust involved. One, as the subject, there needs to be a layer of trust where I'm revealing to you everything. The Miles Davis story, that was one of the most alarming stories to me that he told at the very end. You mentioned like choking somebody out, and then there's a layer of trust that you as the writer, you as the interviewer, are really self-introspective and honest with yourself, and like, hey, am I approaching this subject with any bias, and is that going to show through in the writing, right? Because it's such a big responsibility.
No, I don't even think of it. To be honest with you, I don't think about myself being biased or this or that. I'm trying to create a character that I've just been with. In other words, I don't want to distort you. When I was talking about with the Pacino thing, when I would go into a classroom, I had 2,000 pages of this interview, 2,000 pages. I would show it to my students. This is at UCLA, right? I would put them down. I say, that's one interview. How does that become this? And I would hold up the magazine where you have how many pages are in it. And then that was what my first lecture would be, is that it becomes this because this has to be edited. So I have to read through everything. But you're dealing with a lot of material. And because you better learn how to deal with this. And I had nobody teaching me this. I had to learn myself this. And I thought this is something I could teach people and save you a lot of time. But, how do you index? And so, you work it. So, okay, this is stuff about mother, father, childhood. This is stuff about a certain movie, whatever. When I did the John Huston book, that was hundreds and hundreds of interviews with very big people, and I had so much material. How do you deal with all that stuff? Well, you got to start getting those file folders together on that, but you got to put things together. You have to organize as best you can. It's quite a process. So to Pacino, I'd get it down to a lot of repetition, of course, in things you do, so you don't need it. But sometimes he'll talk about his mother on pages 2, pages 45, page 97,
right,
200, and 650. So I would take those pages, and once I knew I had him in the index, if I have him mention his mother, I said, oh, there's the place, mother, I'll get some of that stuff in, and then work it around, and then make it look like it's a one flowing conversation, where in reality it was over months.
Right.
Streisand 9 months. Brando 10 days on his island every day. Well, I'm condensing it and I'm editing it.
Right.
But I have never had anybody say to me negatively about it. They always thank me for it. Brando wrote me a note complaining about the fact that that I put in things other than the Indians. He was angry about that. But he says, on the other hand, now that I think about it, you made me far more articulate and intelligent than I remember being. He said, I actually wrote that. But most of them will see that, and usually how they see it is after someone else reads it and talks to them about it. And they'll say, man, that was amazing that you did that, or that you went that far, or that you did it. And then they get a feedback, because people who read about themselves, I find it's... you never see yourself that way. You always see yourself a little differently. People who've done interviews with me will sometimes put in my mouth words that I have never said. The words that are a little jarring to me. So I see that even if they taped it, they didn't quite, get it right. I don't correct it. I don't. It's petty in a way, but I notice it, and I notice that I want to be as accurate as I can, even though I am manipulating, conversations that took place on different days, and I'm putting together, making a paragraph out of it. It makes it for a good read. That's why I was doing it all the time, because they read well.
Right. You mentioned Rembrandt drawing himself, and it evolves over time, and it made me think, when you interview Al Pacino at a certain time, he's who he is at that certain instant. Right. Was your goal to show who that Al Pacino X year was at that moment in time, or like more of this is how he became who he was?
It's both, though. It's both, because, and you see, to me, what fascinating about that book, this is a collection of interviews I did with Premiere Magazine, Movie Line Magazine, Hollywood Life, Playboy a few times, Rolling Stone, German Magazine, and one or two others. So there was about 8 or 10 interviews I had done over the years with him.
Right.
And I never thought I was going to put those out. I thought I was going to be writing his book, his bio. But when my daughter once said, "Dad, he's never going to do his book," and she's right. He's never. He's not, because we've known him from, my kids know him all his life.
Right.
So it's not like they're just being sarcastic. They know who he is. And so I said, "Yeah, you're right." And I'm not one to push anybody. I don't. If you want to do it, I'm around or something. So I decided I'll put together this book. But then I asked him. I said, "Al, would you mind?" I said, "If I collected it." Yeah, well, all right, you think so? I said, "Well, I think you might." All right, go ahead, do it. Then I said, "How about if I put them together?" And I said to him, "How about writing an introduction for it?" He doesn't do that, doesn't ever do that. And I know that because I see him, or for it. He says, I don't know. I said, I'll write it. I'll write it for you, and I'll give it to you. So I wrote something, and I said, I give it to him. And it spurred him on to do it, because he said, "No, I don't want to say this." And I like that. And he actually wrote that introduction that's in the book is actually by him. And I was taken by it because, he was perceptive in certain things. But he gave a stamp of approval to the book by doing that, Right. And there's nothing, and there are a lot of things in that book that are a little hard. And to get to your question was, somewhere in the middle of the book, he may be feeling something negative about himself or the times, or one of the actors who died when he was doing American Buffalo. That was a down time for him,
Right.
And I was there for Rolling Stone actually to talk about that stuff. Well, that's different than when he's really up, when he just won the Academy Award for Scent of a Woman or something. I wrote that speech, by the way. But anyway, so my idea is, when looking at it over the years, is, he's talking about Michael Corleone in the first interview, and he's talking about it in the third and in the sixth, but he's talking about it differently. I would have done it he says something later on that he didn't think about before. So you see his own evolving thinking about the characters he's played, because over the years he's changing too. And so it's kind of interesting to see that.
Have you ever done interviews with someone at one point and then it's drastically different? Like, I'm thinking, we know a couple child stars where, like, they came from a solid family.
Oh, yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's, whoa,
yeah,
so much different.
Yeah.
Have you?
I'll tell you, I would say almost everybody at least put it this way. My perception of the person going in, when I first started doing it, it was never like that when I was with them. The event was always different. Barbara Walters, you think you'd go in and just talk with Barbara Walters. No, she had to have her publicist sitting right there. And when I asked her about a facelift question or whatever, the publicist comes in and shouts out, "Bah, bah, bah, that's off the record, you can't say that." I said, "Well, I can say that." Well, I can say what you just said. And Barbara says, "Just be sure to note that I haven't said anything." It was like all this catty shit,
Right.
But it was like interesting to see that, But the people are different. Right. And the people who are the same. I mean, what surprised me with Al was it was the opposite of who I thought he might be, from having seen The Godfather and having seen, Serpico. He was a very shy, quiet guy with a very good sense of humor, and lived poorer than I did, right? He was on Fifth Avenue, you know, and 84th Street. It was Candace Bergen's old apartment. Only it still said Candace Bergen in it. He'd never even changed the name of it. And, you know, but he had a couch that had a hole in it. He had a wicker chair that, you know, when I sat down, I put a hole in it. You know, it was like he had some yogurt on the couch armchair that had molded. It was old. You know, it hadn't been thrown away or anything. So I'm looking around his place in this small apartment, and I'm thinking, wow, you live like, I said, you know, and yeah, he had another house that was out in the Sneed's Landing and all that stuff. But this, you know, this is where he basically stayed. So for some reason, I just said, I know this guy. He goes to make me a cup of coffee, and the dish rag catches fire on the thing. And so I'm in the little kitchen with him, and all of a sudden he's waving this dish rag that's just on fire.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
like, and I mean, well, how can you not laugh? You know,
Right.
and then I find these cookies, Pepperidge Farm cookies. He goes back into the living room. So I'm walking out and I see the cookies. I say, I'll have a cookie, right? So I felt comfortable enough, let's say. Some houses I won't do this, but I felt it with it. So I pull down the cookies and I look, and there are about 25 cookies in there. They all have a bite in them. I couldn't believe that, right? So
No
I didn't.
way.
So I put it back up. But that was my next question. I said, the tape recorders go. I said, Al, let me ask you this: how come you have a whole box of half-eaten cookies? And he says, what are you talking about? Right? Totally denying it. I said, what are you talking? I said, no. I said, it's, you know, it's there. I says, I don't. Of course you do. I said, it's right up there. You know, I'll show it to you. That's funny stuff when you see it in print, because
Right.
I'm constantly ribbing him. And we made a bet for $25 or whatever it was. I don't know if it was that one or something else, but it might have been that. And that's how I was able to end my interview, with having me say to him, "You owe me money," which is the line George C. Scott says and to Paul Newman in The Hustler. But you know, it's sort of like, I kind of just see what I do as an art form. Yes, you know, I mean, I try to manipulate conversation into a place where, when you finish reading it, you have a sense of the person you've read. You have a sense of me as the interviewer, because I'm not shy. Now, the Playboy interview was interesting because you can't use the word I in the Playboy interview.
Interesting.
And I think I did it once, and I think they allowed it in the Brando interview. That you couldn't help it. That the I had to come in that one moment. But what we're talking about are apples and oranges in a certain way. To do a pleasant interview that doesn't go into depth and to
Right.
make a person happy with it in the end is, to me, you know, it's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs with the birds going around her head or something. That's nice and it's pleasant and what, you know, but I want to see the witch sometimes. I want to see what happens when the apple gets bitten. I want to, you know, I mean, look, how did I know that when I asked Warren Beatty about money and taxes that would end the interview? He couldn't, you know what I mean? I only learned that from him. And after that, I never talked to people about their finances until the very end of any interview, because that's always a tricky subject, even more so than sex.
Yeah.
Interesting. Anyway, I'm on a tangent again. So
I'm enjoying it.
Hey, I wanted to stop and follow up about something that we have talked about in the past, and that's the habit-changing platform called Noom. So if you guys don't know, Shawn and I have experienced some huge life changes over the past couple weeks, and my health and fitness could have easily slid to the back of my mind, but Noom helped me stay on track and helped me continue to take small steps towards my goal. So if you guys didn't know, getting in shape isn't just about losing weight. It's about learning healthier habits and feeling better about yourself, whether that's having more stamina to keep up with your busy life, or finally getting into those goal genes, or maybe it's being more in tune with your body's needs. But what if you could use just one program for all your health and weight loss needs? So no more hunting for training apps and workouts or calorie trackers and meal plans. Plus, they have a goal specialist and a community of members to help you keep motivated and stay accountable. It's like a workout bestie all in one place. So me personally, I wanted to lose 10 pounds, but also more importantly, I wanted to have more energy and figure out what I could do in my diet and fitness routines to help me have a higher degree of energy during a time where I knew, having a newborn, we weren't going to be getting a lot of sleep. And so Noom helped me learn about what I could do in my diet. They do a great job of educating you, but then they also have this awesome accountability infrastructure with a team and small group along with a coach who's going to help walk you through and stay accountable. So me personally, there's one point where I didn't use the app for 3 days, and I got a text from my coach, Emily, who reminded me to check in and encouraged me to stay on track. Noom is more than just a diet or weight loss app. They have and take a cognitive behavioral approach. Whatever, it just works. That's all I know. Noom has taught me that no food is good or bad or off limits. They teach moderation, and this platform can be used in conjunction with many pre-existing popular diets if you want to. So it also doesn't take a lot of time. It's usually about 10 minutes a day from my personal experience. And if you guys get off track, there's no shaming. There's just tips to help you get back on track tomorrow. So listen, you don't have time to change it all in one day. Small steps make big progress. Sign up for your trial at Noom. That's Noom.com/redirected. What do you have to lose? Visit Noom.com/redirected to start your trial today. That's Noom.com/redirected. The last weight loss program you'll need.
I am more of an extrovert than my wife is. And the reason is because I love when I meet a stranger to like just say something or ask them something, throw them something to see what sticks. Because I think that the differences in any given person that you might bump into are so awesome and fun and fantastic. And I feel like your interviews really highlight the differences in humanity and how people become who they are, whether it's a bad father, a bad mother, or
so why don't you want to do that?
Well, because it's hard. You know, it's more.
It's more of a challenge. That's all. I mean, you're doing it in a shorter period of time. The thing is, I had time. You know, when Playboy said to me, "You want to interview Sophia Loren?" I said, "How?" You know, I said, "Great." She says, "But you can only do it for 2 hours on Monday, 2 on Tuesday, 2 on Wednesday," and then she's leaving back to Italy. Now, normally, I never care about what they tell me, because I always feel after the second hour that person's going to know that she'll give me all the time I need, or he, because we're having a good conversation. It's just, but in this case with Sophia Loren, it was strict because she had something before that time, so that was it. I said, no, I can't do it. It's not. I don't have enough time. I look at that to me is insane, because today nobody gets 6 hours with anybody. Sure. You know, I mean, but that was not even my minimum for a Playboy interview. I expected to be there for 52 hours. I have with Barbra Streisand on tape. I was with her for longer, but just the actual taping. Brando, the same thing. You know, I was over 10 days, and we didn't tape for the first 3 though. But the next 6 we did. I left on the day after. So, and you're talking 4 or 5 hours a time, you know, until that person gets really tired. Sometimes it's me. I mean, sometimes I have to go to the bathroom so bad. Mae West, she never went to the bathroom, and I'm dying to take a pee, and I'm talking to her, you know. It's just like, and I don't want to say, excuse me. I don't want to interrupt our eye contact, our thing, you know. And yet sometimes, you know, that happens.
Yeah. So you just mentioned eye contact, and I have found that, like, interviewing somebody, it's such an intimate experience where, like, I really feel like it's, whenever I do it, the hour or the 2 hours that it takes is my favorite in that entire week, because it's like a different world where I'm just completely enthralled and like trying, who is this guy? Right.
And do you feel that way like a half hour before? What are you thinking about? Like, are you thinking, oh, I'm going to have a really good experience, or I hope I do something? You know, are you concerned? Are you nervous? Do you get a little anxiety? Is it anything like playing ball? I mean, with, you know.
So I do get anxiety, and it's in that, have I prepared enough to take this interview to the spot that I want it to? Like, do I know this person enough so that, because I do, it's comfortable to talk about what they always talk about, but I do try to just like kind of skip over that so that we can get to the next level. Mm-hmm. But to answer your question on why don't I show the true, the true pros and cons of every person, is because I guess on a personal note too, you know, you have this big New York personality. You're from Brooklyn, Queens, right? Which is also the home of another interviewer you mentioned in the book. Who is it? There was another one in your interview with yourself.
Oh,
shoot,
Brooklyn.
Was it Letterman or Leno? I think it was Leno.
Might have been. Yeah,
anyway, I have like when
But I grew up. I think everybody was from Brooklyn and moved out. I really believed that. I thought the whole country was populated with people from Brooklyn. So when I went to California, and people saw me as an oddity, I thought that was funny.
Right. But New Yorkers have a different personality.
They
And
do.
when I interview somebody, my goal, and even talk with anybody, my goal is to have them take their guard down and leave it there.
Yeah, but
And
that's what I try for too. Exactly.
In the book, you mentioned you tried to have them lower their guard, and it's not in a vicious way, but you say that's when you ask the sensitive questions.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's because if they lowered their guard, they are now no longer protecting themselves
Sure.
from you and the whole process. Okay, let's talk honestly. And once you feel that guard is lowered, then you can say, by the way, what happened when you stabbed your wife? I mean,
Right. And that's what...
those are tough questions.
Well,
I mean, look, you think it was easy to talk to Bobby Knight? Bobby Knight punched me twice.
Big fan of Bobby
know?
Knight. I love those stories because I'm from
Bobby-
Indiana myself. So.
Well, but Bobby Knight is the one interview that I put in the Art of the Interview as an example. It's the only interview I did. The whole interview is the back of that book, the last thing, because that to me was the structure of a 3-act play. What happened with me and Knight, that never happened before. I mean, with Jesse Ventura was a very famous interview, and I was on TV and radio for weeks. I was amazed by that. But with Bobby Knight, it was because he had attacked me. It was because it was like he had just been fired. For this zero tolerance policy, and some kid said to him, he was a triplets. Thank you. Look for the word. Oh my goodness. So it was one of them. And they said to, hey Bob, how you doing? Or something like that. And you either say, hey coach, or hey Mr. Knight, or hey Coach Knight. You don't say hey Bob or
Right.
Bobby. And he apparently grabbed the kid by his neck, and he told him that you don't do this. So that was it. Out he goes. Now Bob Knight could be the governor of Indiana. I mean, there's no doubt that he's the most popular guy there. And
Besides me.
besides you.
Okay.
But I was in the car with him when we got pulled over for speeding. Cop comes over and says, "Oh, Coach, it's you," and he just walks away. How you doing? No ticket. There's no none of that stuff. But he's a wild man, and he should be teaching at like West Point. He should be teaching at a military academy, because those are the people who are trained to listen to a coach, to a sergeant, right? Give me 50. You're going to drop down and give 50. I'm not going to give you 50.
Right.
I don't want to, but if your mentality and your direction is that way, well, then, that he can be a really hell of a coach. But when he was coaching, Isaiah Thomas or whatever, they didn't want to play by his rules necessarily, right, even as young people. So he was an exceptional coach. There's no doubt about it. But he had this crazy temper where he would pick up kids. He once took a kid's shit and held it up. And I mean, he did nasty things. And I knew about all this stuff. And Roy Firestone was a very close friend of mine. Had interviewed him on camera a few times. So I had his notes. I had his tapes, the outtakes. So I prepared a good deal to talk to him, but they were all tough questions.
Right.
And he. Do you want to hear the story? Because this is, the night story is a little long, so I'm not sure if you want to go with
ends.
How far do you want me to go with it?
I'll just abridge because it ends with "Get out of here" and give me those tapes, right?
Yeah. Well, he got so angry when I asked him about. We were just driving. This was the very beginning. We were going to drive to Ohio. To his son was going to be coaching or assistant coaching a game. So he wanted to go see it. I said, well, how long does it take to get there? It's like 6 hours. 6 hours, he would say. I just met him, and it's just, the next morning he wants to do this. I said, will we stay somewhere? I have to make plans. Do I need to take a toothbrush and underwear? Or do I need, besides my tape recorder? And he goes, no, we'll come back. We'll just see the game and come back. So that's 12 hours. So anyway, that's so I said, okay, well, this is where the interview is going to take place, and then you have the sound of the engine, whatever. So I had my tape recorder. I put it right between us in the console, and we're just talking, and not 20 minutes into it, we were speeding along this, and he said, I asked him, how did he feel, with what happened when the kids said this to you or whatever. And all of a sudden, there's this loud boom like this. And I went, what? And I thought we hit a deer. And what happened was Knight hit the steering wheel. And he was so angry for my question. And his face tripled in size. And he's a big man. He's 6'5". And like, like this.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm looking at him, and he starts screaming at me, "You don't know what they do." And I said, okay, calm down, coach. Calm. And he's just like, he says, he kicked me out. He wanted to kick me out. He says, I'm going to pull over. You're going to get out. I said, Coach, it's okay. Let's just start again. That kind of thing. Okay, so he finally comes down. We miss our exit by 3. He's got to turn. He says, because of you, I missed my exit. He was so mad. And I'm now, so the questions I start asking him are all the easier questions about what do you, how should basketball be changed? Because he believes that it should be wide in the court or whatever. Who's the best athlete? Tell me about Ted Williams. All this kind of stuff that
right.
So I asked him all these questions on the way up. But on the way back, he was. I had run out of questions, but the good easy question. I had all the tough ones, and there was another guy in the car, who was Danaher. His name was. He was a coach. Right? He was a scout at the time for a pro team, and he was driving Knight's car. Knight was sitting in the front. I was in the back, and Knight says, "Okay, Larry, ask me some questions." He says. And I said, Coach, why don't we save it for tomorrow when we're back? I said, because I asked you all the easy questions. And I only have my hard questions left. Go ahead, ask me. Just ask me. Don't worry about it. If I don't like it, I won't answer. Okay. So I said, what happened when you put the guy in the basket? When you walked into the dining room after a loss and you stuck this guy in the basket, and he says, well, what would you have done? The guy was, we had won the game, and he's turned up, and he's gone on and on. And I said, well, was he inebriated? He says, of course he wasn't drunk. I said, well, then I probably would have said thanks for the talk, and then I'd walk away. And just that, he got so angry at me telling him what I would have done, And he grabbed the tape recorder that was in the front, and he threw it at me in the back, and it landed on the seat. And then he said, give me the tapes. Give me your tapes. Now, we had been talking all the way up, halfway down, and I went, I can't do that, Coach. And we're driving still. We're driving about 50, 60 miles an hour on this highway. And he leans over. He puts his 2 knees on the seat, right? And he leans over at me. Now he's got that big head again. And he starts, and I took my bag that I keep the tapes in, and I'm holding them. And he grabs them. And now we're wrestling. And I'm looking at him, and it's dark, but I can see it. I said, you don't want to do this, Coach. You don't want to do this. Because I know this is all what I'm going to write about. This is insane. But what else can you do? You're not going to write about this? This is what's happening. So I pull it away from him, and I'm looking to jump out. I'm actually looking, I open the door and roll. And I'm thinking, we're going too fast right now. But if he slows up to about 30, I'm going to try it. This is how crazy it was in there. And
wow.
And anyway, we get to where this other Danaher's car was. We had picked him up halfway up. So we got 3 more hours to get back to Bloomington. And we had been quiet, because he was seething in the front, and I was like protecting my tapes and whatever. And Danaher's going, so we get to the other one. He says, well, we have a situation here, Danaher says, and he was 73 years old or something. I felt bad for him. And he says, Bob, Coach, if you want, I'll drive you home and Larry can drive your car, or I'll drive Larry home and you can drive your car, but I don't think the 2 of you should be in the same car for the next 3 hours. And I said, I agree, because I thought I was going to get killed. Right. So, and Knight goes, I'll take you back like this. I'll take you back. So I get in the back. Oh, no, Danaher says, Larry, get in the back. So, okay. So then Donna says goodbye. We're at a gas station. We finish with the gas. Donna leaves. Knight sits there, and he goes, I'll take you back. He says, but I'll be goddamn if I'll be your chauffeur. Get in the front. So I get in the front, and I leave my tape and everything in the back. I just want to get home safely right now. And I look at him, and I have to diffuse this situation because it was really been volatile. I mean, he tried to throw me out twice. And I was aching. Later, by the way, I found out that he almost broke a rib. I had a huge bruise in I didn't even feel it then, but I had to see a doctor about this. I said, wow, I got punched. I mean, really amazing, right? Because that was what was going on there. He was just swinging wildly, I think, to get to my case, and it must have hit me. So I looked at him, and I just put out my hand. I didn't know I was going to do this, and I said, Coach, give me your hand. And he looks at me like it's vermin, I mean, I'm a reporter, a journalist. I'm the worst scum in the world for him. And I said, give me your hand. And I didn't move it. And he did. He finally took my hand and he held it and I held it tight. And I said, listen, I didn't come here to do a job on you. I said, I have been reading about you and everything has been written about you. And there's a lot of stuff that I don't know if it's true or not, but I'm giving you the chance to correct it, to correct the record. If you don't want to take it, then just tell me pass, and we'll go on to the next subject. But that's my job, is to get you to correct your own record. It's to help you.
Yeah.
And then he said, you don't understand. They ripped my heart out. They took me. He starts confessing about his, how he really feels. It's unbelievable stuff. And all I'm thinking in my head is, God damn, the tape recorder's on the other back. And I'm thinking, okay, Larry, you have to remember this. You have to, turn on your memory brain because he is opening up like this. And I think he sees my eyes. We haven't started driving yet. As my eyes are darting to the, and he says, all right, you want to get your machines. He says like that. And I said, I don't want you to ruin them. He says, I won't. I said, all right. So I left one in the back, but I took one, put a new tape in, and for the next 3 hours, he talked about, the emotional stuff. Now, when I did this interview, it starts with, me getting to him, and and then you ask this question where he then bangs the thing and he starts screaming, and then you calm him down, so now you're going this way, and then he gets angry again, then he wants to kick you out, and then, Danaher says, and he goes, I'll be goddamn, I'll be your chauffeur kind of thing. Yeah. And then the next thing you know, he's confessing like that. So to me, it's one of those things you could do and you can teach, which is what I did. So I put it in the interview book like that, and then I put little gray, along the margins, I'm telling you what happened during the thing and what happened I did. So that to me is a real lesson in interviewing. It's a long way of going to this, but it's a long, and that by the way, I was on the radio for that. Every day, all the sports radio around the country were reading from this interview. They were play acting, me and him. I got calls, and everybody wanted me to play the actual tape because I have when he exploded. But I wouldn't do that tonight. I didn't think I should. So I said no. But I did say to Playboy, you got to pay me some money for just talking this much because I'm doing a lot of publicity for you, and it's taken up my day. It took about 2 weeks. 2 weeks of talking on the radio to St. Louis and Florida and whatever, and telling these stories about Bob Knight. They love to hear those stories.
So you asked the question earlier, where does creativity come from? And that story about Bob Knight reminds me that a lot of the times the famous people in society are the extreme people in society.
Well,
Bob Knight being angry. And to go back to our different interview styles, and maybe this is a hint that I might not be good at interviewing, but your goal is to get people's guard to drop so that you can figure out where the boundaries of who they are lie.
Yeah, I would say yes.
And my goal is, I feel like everybody has their guard up so often that it's rare to just get them to lay their guard down. And then once they're there, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to make you feel safe. So big difference between us.
Well, but listen, you'll judge this thing. Have I talked too much? Have I taken more control than you wanted? Have I not answered the questions you wanted to get asked? Do you feel if you've come away that you understand what being an interviewer is better or less? That's on you because you have to interrupt me and stop me and move me around.
How do you interrupt somebody?
Yeah.
Just go for it.
You have to go for it sometimes. You know, I mean, I remember once, God bless him, Sam Denoff. He was a writer, but I produced a show for my daughter when she was at Beverly Hills High School many years ago, and it was called How Hollywood Works. And it was like this, where she got to talk to...
Well, let's get back on track here, Larry.
Yeah, okay.
How'd I do right there?
Yeah, there you go. There you go. I was going somewhere with that, but...
Finish. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I think, but that's what Sam Denoff said to my daughter was, after I said, how do you think she did? Because I prepped her. I showed her how to interrupt. Yeah. She says, well, yeah, she got to teach her not to interrupt me so much. He says, she kept cutting off my stories. And I told her she did a great job because his stories, like me, can go on for too long. Sure. You know, when you kind of edit a piece and you're trying to move things along, you know, it's very difficult. Alex Haley told great stories on TV while I interviewed him for TV, but all of his stories were long. So when we ended up cutting it to 8 minutes, you couldn't use those stories. You had to use other things, not as good. So, you know, you learn, you know, which form. I ignored the forms. I just talk, and I leave it up to you to decide whether or not what you're getting is what you want. What you're getting from me is basically personality. Right. You know, you get to see that I can talk about anything in a way, so that I, you know, tell stories, and that's how I do it. You know, I mean, if I'm sitting across now from Brad Pitt, or if I'm sitting with Leonardo DiCaprio,
you're going to who I remind you of.
Yes, exactly. No. You exactly. But you're better looking. You're younger. So, but you know, it's just getting to know you kind of stuff. And then ask questions. I still haven't, you know, asked you any deep questions at all, but I feel I could.
I have a couple thoughts. One being, you mentioned in your book when you're interviewing somebody who's known for like one big award, like a Nobel Prize winner, or my wife is an Olympic gold medalist, and I feel like this is a skill of mine, is realizing you probably have to talk about that thing in an interview for sure,
right?
But on a personal level. So, side note, this is a fun story. My grandfather-in-law is a Nobel Prize winner in chemistry.
Okay.
And then I married an Olympic gold medalist. And so I get the fact, I've got an inside scoop on the fact that they always have to talk about that. And they're comfortable talking about that. But there's so much more to them than that.
Yeah.
And there's so much value in the things that they don't usually talk about. So the art of realizing the fine line of like, hey, it might be a good place to start, or like, hey, congratulations on this. Yeah. And then using that to transition into something is... You
know, Richard Feynman told me that winning the Nobel Prize was a real pain in the ass for him, because he could normally, when someone came to interview him or talk to him, it was always about the subject that they were dealing with. Or but the Nobel Prize, people asked different questions. They were more cautious around him. The only time he felt free was around children, because they didn't know what a Nobel Prize was, and they could just ask him whatever they wanted, and then he could talk to them. So he found it a bit difficult in that regard.
And it limits.
And you know, it's true, because you know, you feel almost like if somebody has won some kind of a prize, you might feel that you should be congratulating them for a prize, even if it's 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Right. And in fact, that's not really what matters so much anymore. Anyway, I enjoyed our talk.
No, I did too. And
as far as rating it goes, no, I think you definitely, I feel comfortable with you. That's getting over a huge hump. Your eye contact has stayed with me. That was great, and your smile never left. I didn't see, you know, in your eyes where you wanted to go like, it's like that. There wasn't a ring there or a sparkle that says I should take him that way. You know what I mean? And that may be just because nothing happened there. You know, that I didn't hit that bone that you would relate to, and that could be with the nature of athletics. It could be the nature of, you know, what you did. You said you spent 5 years before you got out there. I'm curious about going there. Well, and are you going to continue playing, or are you giving this up? You know, I mean, I don't know what your story is, but I thought it'd be interesting.
Maybe a part two, but this is to your credit. Yeah. Even in interviewing you, I feel like I've found out something about myself, in the sense that
you learn.
That's
You
right.
talking to me, what I learned.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like I've learned, one, that I have this life philosophy that isn't challenging by nature. And that shows itself in my reluctance to stop you when you're telling a story that might not be. I have this whole list of questions that we didn't get to.
Right.
But I feel like that's almost revealing in the sense of like, hey, I have work to do as an interview, but also as an interviewer, but also it kind of reveals something about me, who I am, right? And the fact that I didn't have a sparkle in my eye, I feel like one of my advantages in conversation, maybe in interviewing, is like I am really curious about everything.
Right.
And so whatever story you're telling, I'm going to be completely into it, right? Like the Bob, I didn't want that story to stop, even though that's not the story I wanted you to tell. It was like, I want to hear this, but it doesn't ultimately achieve my goal of where I want this conversation.
Well, you know,
to go,
so
right?
but here's
So,
the
like,
thing. Here's for that goal. And in the end, if the goal was more important than the result, then what I suggest is the actual writing down of questions. So,
I had them.
Yeah, but you know, I mean, and especially now with these iPads, you have a big screen in front of you. If you put your foot up like this, balance it this way so I don't see it. You know what I mean? So I'm just seeing the back of it. You know, then you have this to glance at if you wanted to go there.
But
because that's what I always did.
Right.
I mean, I always felt. It depends on the time. Like if I have unlimited time and I know it, if I know I'm going to see Al the next day and the next day, then we're just going to sit around and bullshit all the time. And then something unbelievable is going to come out of that because you're going to get a much more intimate conversation. But for the most part, when you only have an hour or half hour or 15 minutes, if you have an agenda other than I just want to present this guy whoever he is, you know what I mean, which is fine. Excuse me, once I start talking, that's who I am. You know what I mean? So you say, hey, I got that guy in 15 minutes. I got it. Yeah. But if there was information that you were looking for that you didn't get, then that's the stuff you have to think about. I gotta put a priority of the top 3 things starred, you know, and make sure that those are covered somewhere along that conversation. So do you know, is there anything that we haven't talked about but you're curious about as far as an interviewer goes?
Well,
here's your chance.
I think we might need to do a part 2, honestly. But I do feel like this was successful in the sense that the audience probably learned something about me, Andrew, and I feel like we heard so many stories.
Well, they should learn about you too, because they're watching this. Don't forget, they're not watching it always just to see your guest. They're seeing a dynamic. And I assume you're on camera as well.
Yeah.
So they're seeing that. Then you become that character. Barbara Walters was more famous than anybody she interviewed. Yeah. I mean, Henry Kissinger, the Pope, whoever it was. People watch because Barbara Walters did it. Right. Sometimes she drove me nuts because I look at it from the question point of view and I say, why are you asking that? Or why are you going so soft? Or, please don't ask him to dance. You know, whatever it be. Right. But that's my point of view. You know, it's not necessarily my wife's point of view when she watches it.
Well, I appreciate the time today, Mr. Grobel. And if you want to learn more about him and his 29 books, you can go to lawrencegrobel.com, GROBEL.com, and find out more. But this was really fun and insightful, so I appreciate it.
Hey, it was fun for me too. But I thought your wife was coming in. You said she's going to be coming in. Well, she never even did.
We're going to have to do a part 2, babe. This is Shawn. Here.